Well, good evening, everybody. Boy, this is way more manageable. You guys should have seen the 5:30. This will be a little calmer. Well, hey, Merry Christmas Eve. If I haven't met you before, if you guys are new or maybe you're visiting for the first time, my name is David. I'm one of the elders and one of the teaching pastors on staff. And to me, Christmas time means story time. And I don't know what it is, whether it's reminiscing with friends over the past year or maybe it's retelling the central story of the season. There is something about this time of year that just makes me yearn, and maybe you can relate, for a story by the fire. And so we've got the fire lit, and I have a story that I want to tell you guys tonight. Our story is called The House. And it starts in a small rural community called Crownan. It's on the outskirts of Philippi, a city in West Virginia, which, by the way, that's a real city, Philippi. And this town of Crownan has a very, very bad reputation. In fact, it is the landfill capital of the state of West Virginia. Rumpke, the garbage company, owns 70% of that community. And so what people say over and over again is that only bad smells come out of Crownan, okay? Nothing good ever comes out of this community. But what we'll learn tonight is that that's just not true. Because Joe and Marina Davidson have lived in Crownan their entire lives. They're both 18 years old, and they're a young, vibrant couple. They've been best friends ever since they were in 6th grade. And Joe's a hard worker. Joe works 6 days a week on one of the Rumpke trucks. He's a hard worker, but his true passion is photography. Now, he and Marina have been pure all throughout their relationship. They've agreed to stay virgins until they're married, proclaiming to everybody who will listen that the purpose of our relationship is to honor God above all else. Now, here's the thing, though. Many around the town of Crownan, they are so tired of hearing Joe and Marina's confessions of faith. They're just tired. And especially do they grow tired when Joe and Marina announced to everybody in town that somehow, some way, miraculously, they are pregnant months before their wedding. They claim we've never been intimate, we've done nothing but hold hands, but somehow we're pregnant. And so you can imagine what happened next. So the people in town, instead of going up to Joe and Marina and kind of talking to them face to face, they decided, let's take it to Twitter and to Facebook. And so they condemned Joe and Marina online, saying things like this. Well, those Davidsons, they're hypocrites. They're liars. They're sinners. You can't trust them. They don't really love and honor God. How could they? They're fakes. They don't live out what they say they believe. And so throughout the pregnancy, which is about 9 months in at this point, there's only been one person, and that is Marina's cousin, Beth, who really believes the story. Only Beth that says, okay, I believe this is a miracle. I believe what you're telling me. But this isn't the only problem the Davidsons are facing. Because Joe and Marina live in this old, beautiful farmhouse sitting on 70 acres that has been passed down for generations. In fact, it's been about 100 years that this house has been passed down from family to family to family. And in the past year, Joe's parents have taken the keys to the house and they've handed them over to Joe as an early wedding gift. Now, here's the thing. The mayor of Crownan has always had his eye on this house and this land. The mayor, known to many as simply Mr. Harold, is an angry and aggressive businessman who desperately wants the Davidson land. And here's why he wants it. Because he wants to build a sprawling shopping center on this piece of property. He believes this is the only land in Crownan that would really work for his dream project. And here's what else Mr. Harold knows. He knows that if Joe and Marina were ever to have a child, then what that would mean is that the house would be guaranteed to be in their family's possession long after Mr. Harold was gone. And Mr. Harold refuses to accept this. So here's what he does. He calls up a group of young entrepreneurs from California. They're called the Wise Guys. They're land developers. They are colorful hipsters with a real knack for hitting the jackpot with cutting-edge land development. Here's what Mr. Harold wants to do. He wants to use the Wise Guys to find out what would tempt what would force the Davidsons to move? While also these guys would come up with a plan for the shopping center. It would be kind of like a vintage t-shirt shop, a brewery, a boot store, a small plate bistro, just to name a few of the stores. So you guys get that joke. Nobody has got that joke all night. Thank you. And so they want to build this huge, sprawling shopping center on this land. But here's where they get a little bit of a break. So Rumpke calls up all of its employees and it says, hey, Joe, listen, here's what we're going to do. We're going to send everyone to Birmingham, Alabama, and what we're going to be doing down there is a retreat and some training for all the workers from Crownin. We're going to go down there as a big Rumpke team, and Joe and Marina are thrilled by this. Just to get a weekend away would be so refreshing because the gossip and the pressure in Crownin, it's grown to a fever pitch. So I don't know if you've ever driven from here to Birmingham, Alabama. I have. My dad actually grew up in Birmingham, Alabama, so over the years, we would make that drive. It's quite a long drive, not all that exciting. And so for them, it was pretty uneventful as well, until they were minutes away from the hotel that they were going to be staying for the weekend on the outskirts of Birmingham in a very rural district. Now, there's only one state road going in and out, and the problem is that it was down to one lane. And so they ended up getting stuck in traffic for about a half an hour. And so getting a little bored, Marina pulled out her phone and she said, you know what I'll do? I'll check to see if our hotel reservation, is still lined up. And as she got online, she realized we have no hotel room. She turns to Joe and says, Joe, you forgot to reserve our room. And Joe dropped his head in his hands and he says, I thought you were doing it. That's the one thing you said you were going to do. Well, Marina held back her frustration, and it was hard. She's very uncomfortable, very pregnant at this point, and Joe was trying, and she knew that. So she jumped back on her phone, checked a few other things, and said, you know what? There are tons of hotels in another town about 7 miles away, plenty of rooms. Let's just go there. But if we're going to make it, we're going to need more gas. Joe had forgotten about that as well. They were on fumes, but thankfully there was a gas station coming right up if they could just get the traffic to move. And eventually it did. The cars started kind of creeping along and they were able to pull into this gas station. You'll see it behind me. It looked more suited for a haunted house or maybe a museum, and nobody else was there. The only person in the gas station was a teenage attendant who was taking a smoke break outside, listening to some loud music through his headphones. He had no clue what was going on. And so Marina smiled at him as she rushed inside the convenience store, having to find a restroom. The attendant didn't notice at all, didn't flinch, just staying underneath that large pine tree, kind of tapping his foot to the heavy metal beat. And as Joe began filling up the car, his mind started to wander as he began staring at a group of stray cats that were drinking from a rusted silver bowl right there in front of the convenience store. But his wandering didn't go very far, because it was interrupted by a loud scream coming from the convenience store. And so Joe immediately left the gas pump, began sprinting toward the convenience store. He had to leap over the stray cats, who for some reason began following him in. And as soon as he made it in that convenience store, you know what happened? He heard another yell. It was Marina, and she was in the bathroom. So he started running towards the bathroom, and as he barged into it, he saw two things that immediately he just could not comprehend. The first thing he saw was that he had just stepped into the most filthy environment of his life. Now, coming from a garbage man, that says a lot, right? The second thing he noticed is that his wife was giving birth on the floor of this filthy place. Oh no, Joe muttered to himself. Oh no. So he reached for his phone. No bars, no signal, and of course not. He's in a gas station that hails from the 1950s. What did he expect? There was no reception out there. And then it came to him. He was going to have to come up with a plan. He was going to have to do something. So he turned around and he ran back out of the restroom. Joe, Marina shouted, "Where are you going?" No doubt confused. Joe, where are you going? As Joe ran back into the store area, the cats, for some reason, stayed back in the restroom as if watching over Marina. And Joe quickly, frantically began looking around the convenience store trying to find a t-shirt, anything. And eventually he did. he found a rack of t-shirt over there by the discount DVDs. And the t-shirt was great, right? I love big trucks, and I cannot lie. So he grabbed one of those, and then he grabbed the pair of scissors that were just there by the cash register. And as he grabbed both of those, he heard his wife again. Well, not his wife yet. Wife at this time. Go read the scripture. It's kind of confusing. But anyway, at this moment, it really is. Joe Marina screams again, "Joe, get in here." And so Joe barged back into the bathroom, t-shirt in one hand, scissors in the other, and then he started grabbing as many hand towels as he could get. And as he grabbed those hand towels, he prayed a quick prayer, trying to convince himself that he was a doctor. And he said to himself, "I can do this. I can do this." But Joe's confidence shook as another one of his wife's screams just echoed throughout the entire gas station. And so now we jump outside. Remember the construction? And so now we're there with the road crews across from the gas station. They're wrapping up their day. And they're pulling in the cones. They're pulling in the street signs. They're directing, they're shepherding the last group of cars. And Big Bobby, the team leader, well, he hears the scream from the gas station. And he stops. "Did you guys hear that?" he said to the rest of the crew. Well, the two other remaining crewmen, desperate to get home after a long day, kind of reluctantly nodded. Yeah, we heard that." "Wait, there it is again," Big Bobby said. "It's coming from the gas station." They all three took a moment to look at each other before Big Bobby spoke again. He could tell they were hesitating. He said, "Hey, guys, do you remember what we talked about this morning during our morning devotion?" Because these three guys would always do a Bible study before heading out for the day's work. And Steve, the man to Bobby's right, knew it wasn't a coincidence. And he said, kind of sheepishly, "Yeah, Good Samaritan, crossing the street to help those in need." And Steve said it with a sigh, resigned that they were going to help whether they liked it or not. So Big Bobby, full of energy, he nodded and started running toward the screams, obviously coming from the gas station. And the two other road workers quickly followed behind. Now, Big Bobby reached the bathroom first. But here's what he noticed. The screams had stopped. So he swung open the bathroom door, and what did he find? He found Joe and Marina on the floor, both covered in the blood of birth and surrounded by a few stray cats. But their smiles said it all. The baby was fine. The big truck's t-shirt, the hand towels, the old scissors to cut the umbilical cord, they had done the job. But Big Bobby still wanted to help. He pulled out his phone, ready to dial 911. But then he stopped and he asked, "So what's his name? What's the baby's name?" "Joshua," Joe said, smiling as he hears the name of his son from his own voice for the first time. But the story doesn't end there. Do you guys remember our young, hip entrepreneurs from California? Well, these guys hear about Joshua being born, and they go tell Mr. Harold. And so Mr. Harold says, "Here's what I want you guys to do. I'm going to send you off, and I want you to learn more about this family and see how we can bully them to finally sell their land." But in their research, the wise guys learn a lot more about the house of Davidson. For generations, this home had been used to house slaves fighting for their freedom. And its historical and spiritual significance led the Davidson family very early on to make this vow that they'll never allow the house to fall out of their family. And these land developers were wise enough to know you do not mess with such a vow. Instead, on this evening, the wise guys decide, let's follow our GPS. Let's see where it takes us. They've got the address, and they make their way to the Davidson house in Crownen, finding the Davidson family arms wide open, welcoming them in very warmly. And instead of being Mr. Harold's bullies that night, the wise guys decided, let's do the opposite. Let's lavish the Davidson family with gifts, and let's promise them that we're going to lead Mr. Harold astray, giving him bad business advice. In fact, one of the wise guys said to Joe and Marina, "Listen, Mr. Harold trusts us. At least he does for now. And so we're going to go back to him. We're going to tell him that we found your land totally unsuitable for his needs." So guess what? Mr. Harold never built on that land. But Joshua did. Eventually, the miracle baby grew to become a man, and he added onto the house. And he made it so big that the home seemed to stretch over all 70 acres. And the house became a children's home. And you know what Joshua did? He invited in all the missing, all the marginalized, and he loved them as his own kids. And to this day, people are unable to count or even comprehend how many Joshua has adopted in as his own sons and his own daughters. And no matter how many Joshua invites in, the house always has enough room. The end. And so what a humble beginning. What started on the floor of a filthy gas station restroom eventually birthed the home of countless sons and daughters. Yet this is also the story of Jesus. What you just heard there is what's called an allegory. It's a moving metaphor of the Christmas story. But no matter how filthy that restroom was, no matter the scenario, no matter the panic, no matter the conditions that make us all cringe a little bit, that cannot even come close to comparing to the scene 2,017 years ago when Jesus came, was born as a baby in the manger, born of a teenage virgin in the grime of a dirty cave made to be a stable. God arrives in the flesh, a humble beginning if there ever was one, and there was no procession of trumpets, there was no confetti, no, just some awestruck shepherds and a group of wise and wealthy Gentiles on their way. What started on the floor of a filthy stable became the cornerstone of God's eternal home and family. Yet the story wasn't first told in Jesus' time. You know when this was first told? It can be debated, but it was also talked about in the time of King David. We've been talking about King David for the last 6 weeks. And during this moment, David is actually doing pretty well as a king. Actually, he's doing so good that he wants to show his appreciation to God. And he says, God, what I want to do for you, you've taken me from shepherd to king, and so I want to build a home for you, God. I want to build you a house to show you my gratitude. And so David calls in Nathan the prophet, and he says, Nathan, here's the plan. I love God so much, and I appreciate him so much, I'm going to build him a house bigger than my own palace. And Nathan says, whoa, hold on for a second, David, because God's got a better idea. And we read about this idea in 2 Samuel chapter 7. And I'm going to have my friend Lauren, she's going to come up, and she is going to read what Nathan communicates to David for God.
The Lord declares to you that the Lord himself will establish a house for you. When your days are over and you rest with your ancestors, I will raise up your offspring to succeed you, your own flesh and blood, and I will establish his kingdom. He is the one who will build a house for my name, and I will establish the throne of his kingdom forever. I will be his father, and he'll be my son. When he does wrong, I will punish him with a rod wielded by men, with flogging inflicted by human hands. But my love will never be taken away from him, as I took it away from Saul, whom I removed before you. Your house and your kingdom will endure forever before me. Your throne will be established forever.
Thank you, Lauren. The Lord declares to you that he will establish a house for you, David. What he's saying is, David, I don't want you to build a house for me. I'm going to build a house for you. And it's going to be a house that stretches from your imperfect kin to my perfect king. And this will not be a house of brick and mortar. Nope, it's going to be a spiritual home, an everlasting, unending kingdom ruled by an eternal king. And those are the three key words for tonight: everlasting, unending, eternal. In other words, God is saying, David, we're going to need a bigger house. We're going to need a house bigger than anything you can build, because God's saying, I'm inviting everyone in through my son, through the invitation that comes through Jesus. And so here's a question I want to close with. Have you been searching for a home like this? If so, maybe tonight is your humble beginning. Maybe tonight is the night that you call off the search party. You put down the hammer, you put down the nails, and we allow God to be the builder and the provider of our true home. There's always a room for you in his house. If there is nothing you get from tonight, I hope it's that. There's always room for you in his house. Kids, hear me when I say that. Adults, hear me when I say that. Even when it feels like there's not enough room for you in your own home, there's always room for you in his house. And so the birth of Jesus was the cornerstone of God's house, the ignition of God going after our own hearts. And so here's how we're going to close. I want you guys to stand with me, and we're going to celebrate the coming of our King and be reminded that he was born to build the everlasting, never-ending, eternal home. And as we worship here's my thought. As I want you guys just to give just a little pause of what Jesus means to you tonight. Looking back at the humble beginning, his life he lived, his death on the cross, and his resurrection. In your own journey right now, in your own life, what part of that story is connecting with you the strongest? What has he done lately for you that in this time of worship we can thank him, we can praise him? And so let's celebrate the coming of our King. Let's celebrate the true builder and provider of our home. Let's worship.